I was chipping away at the massive mountain of ignorance that we all face. I had some questions, and the answer was, sit down and shut up. I didn't really think that was satisfactory. There was a time in my life when I went to school for the very first time. Found it interesting. I was 6 years old. Next morning, my mother woke me up and said, "Get up, you have to get ready to go to school." I was puzzled. I said, "I went yesterday." I didn't quite grasp the idea of education being an ongoing thing. Although I've enjoyed my first day, I didn't know that I was going to spend the rest of my life, and it has been a fairly lengthy one, learning. Education is something that never ends. Well, some people who vote for unnamed people might have stopped learning some time ago, but that's a different issue altogether. I was chipping away at the massive mountain of ignorance that we all face. We never get to the point where we do more than chip away at it, because we know, if you have any wisdom at all, that you know a lot less than what you don't know. And in the process of chipping away at this ignorance, gradually, I began questioning the spiritual aspect of my life. The secular stuff is easy enough. You gradually learn it, and if you spend some time trying to learn it, gradually it comes to you. But your spiritual journey is a little bit different. There are unknowables, and you are faced with the fact that you cannot know, because it's just too much as far as your spiritual journey is concerned. You have questions about whether or not at the end of this dunya, at the end of your corporeal existence, do you go on to something else? Or do they just throw dirt in your face? And that's the end of it. Questions like that, wise people have been trying to answer for centuries, and none of them have ever successfully done so. My mother spoke German before she spoke English, although she was born in Texas. But as a German, of course, you only have two choices as far as religion is concerned. You're either Catholic or you're Lutheran. My mother was Lutheran, and she raised us as Lutherans as well. And as part of the spiritual journey, certain information was given to us that we were supposed to learn. At the age of 13 or 14, you go to something called catechism, in which you're supposed to learn how to become an adult Lutheran, to have enough spiritual wherewithal to function as a Christian. Now, at that age, I had some questions. I had questions about what I had been taught in Sunday school and what I had heard in the sermons on Sundays. One of the things I wanted to know that I didn't quite understand was how the murder of one of God's appointed rid me of my sins. That seemed like a cop-out to me. That didn't make any sense. So I asked about that. There was another question that Sister Lisa brought up. If there is only one God, why do we have three? That didn't make any sense. Well, the minister who taught the catechism class had a ready answer for a 13-year-old asking those kinds of questions. And the answer was, sit down and shut up. I didn't really think that was satisfactory. I didn't think it was an adequate response to the questions that I thought were quite serious questions. But I soldiered on, we continued on, and later on in high school, my mother and my little sister and I showed up at the Lutheran Church in Gainesville one Sunday, going to attend services. And as we approached the door, the front door, there was an older man who was unkempt, dirty, actually kind of smelled bad, as I recollect. And two of the ushers who were standing there barring his way. He wanted to attend services. They refused to allow him in. And I thought, wait a minute, this old guy wants to have a spiritual experience. He wants to go to church. He wants to listen to a sermon. He wants to pray. And he's being prohibited. And I thought, what kind of religion is that, where he's not allowed to learn about God because he smelled bad, because he hadn't bathed for a while? That bothered me. So while I was in college, I started researching more about religion generally. I made an effort to understand the Southern Asian religions of Hinduism and the Buddhism, but I could never quite get my head around it. I didn't quite understand it. I studied Judaism for a while. And one of the things I discovered about it that I didn't find satisfactory is that a good bit of Jewish thought went to finding ways to obey the law with minimum inconvenience. Very legalistic, but I thought that the spirituality was lacking. Christianity, of course, I studied that, and especially the writings of St. Augustine, and I thought, they really go to an awful lot of trouble to dance around something that is really relatively simple. Further investigation into Christianity revealed that what they were trying to do was shove a Semitic theology into a Greek mold. And that's the reason we have the Trinity, as I understand it, because the Greeks thought the triangle was the most perfect figure. So I had to have 3 points. Now, in those days, the study of Islam was not an easy thing to do. If you wanted a copy of Quran, the only one available really was the one that Thomas Jefferson had, that was a translation by an Englishman who did not like Islam at all. And when he translated from the Arabic, he fudged a little bit to make it look somewhat different from what it really is. But I persevered, and I continued my studies, and eventually came to the conclusion that Islam, of the ones that I had studied, was the one that made sense. It was a relatively simple thing for me to say, God wants me to do certain things, and He has given me a roadmap for doing those things. I thought it very interesting that so much was made of, or so much complexity went into things that turned out to be relatively simple. Now, because I'm a simple person, that was very attractive. So in 1966, I said Shahada. And that has been my faith from that time. But one of the things that is important is that it is as has been pointed out by both our speakers, there's no end to that journey. We continually learn. I noticed in the khutbah that Imam Zafar gave a week ago, that one of the things he talked about that God wants us to do is to think about what it is we're going to do and what it is we're going to think and how it is we're going to treat others. And the khutbah today had to do with making sure that your ego, your id, your nafs doesn't get in the way of doing what is right. It's been an interesting journey, and it has been a fulfilling one, and it is one that I do not regret at all. Communicating those ideas to others is not always an easy task, particularly when they want to say, don't confuse me with the facts, my mind's made up. So, but nevertheless, one of the things that while I don't try and encourage people to follow my path, because everybody's path is bound to be different, and it may not be right for them to follow the way I went, still, I would want them to think about it and to give some thought to the spiritual journey so that when they are done with this dunya, they will be on the right path. Thank you. That's my story.